Hello, friends. It's me. It's Jay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back to Azure FunBytes, where we get together every Thursday, 11 a.m. on the West, 2 p.m. here on the East, where I am here in Brooklyn, New York. And then, of course, if you're out in the UK, it's 7 p.m. And everywhere around the world, you can always find us on the previously recorded episodes. I got always something for you to watch. There's always blog posts. There's everything. So if you ever want to check out other episodes, you can go right here to the Azure DevOps YouTube. We can also go to my YouTube. And of course, you can always keep up to date by following on none other than Twitter. So twitter.com/AzureFunBytes. And so we get together, we love to talk about subjects that really help you get a better idea of the products, the services, and the complementary services that make up Azure and make up an Azure experience that you really enjoy. So I always love to hear from you. I really want to see you all part of this show. So there is the section where you can go ahead and you can leave comments, questions, you name it. I just want to really hear from you because it's super important. You're part of this show as much as I am and my guests. So speaking of my guest, I've got a really great guest this week. I gave you that little intro in the video, but I want you to kind of get ready for what my guest is going to talk about. And so let's take a look at this, and then I'm going to bring my guest in, okay?
The Microsoft Identity Platform offers users a unified way to authenticate into apps with work, school, or personal accounts. It's an evolution of Azure Active Directory for developers. Existing apps built with the ADOL library will continue to work, and users will stay signed in when the apps migrate to MSOL. The app registrations experience now shows all your apps in one place, regardless of whether your app is for enterprises or consumers. To start signing in users, register your app. Name the app. Choose which account types to authenticate, and where to receive the tokens. Here, we use a quick start to bootstrap an app that authenticates users and calls Microsoft Graph in just a few minutes. The Microsoft authentication libraries in the Identity Platform support key scenarios such as web, mobile, desktop, or single-page apps. Open the project in Visual Studio and update the app's info. With just a few lines of code, the app can sign in any Microsoft identity and call Microsoft Graph. Now, run the app and log in using a work account. After entering the verification code, the user grants consent, and the app calls Microsoft Graph and returns the profile information of the work account. Now, log out and sign in with a personal account. Passwordless authentication has been set up, so log in using the Microsoft Authenticator app. With the same code, the personal account is authenticated, and the profile info is pulled from Microsoft Graph. Integrate your apps with the Microsoft Identity Platform to benefit from security and identity innovations, such as passwordless authentication, single sign-on, multi-factor authentication, and conditional access. To learn more, head here.
And hey, here's my guest, Christos Matskas. Hey, Christos, how are you? I got my identity access, authenticator app right here on my phone. I use that. I love that passwordless where I can just enter a challenge. So, hey, welcome to the show.
It's nice to be here. But I think after that awesome video, I don't have anything to say. We're done.
Well, yeah, all right.
Hey, it was nice being here.
We'll see you later. Get out of here. So, Christos, you're coming from the West Coast, if I'm right, in the Pacific Northwest. Am I right?
I am indeed. Yes, I am based in Redmond, Seattle. Hence the 45 show that we do every so often. You can see the nice neon sign, just the corner over there of the 45 show. By the way, Talking about Authenticator, did you know they can actually now manage all your passwords using the Authenticator app, so you don't need a third-party authentication?
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that. I thought that was really cool. It's always great to have one place to kind of go to. And it's certainly better than I think using some of the browsers that store passwords nowadays. I would much rather have a secure place that's trusted, backed also by
Microsoft.
the security you get from Microsoft. Absolutely.
Yes. It's all about security. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of what exactly we're going to be talking about today. And before I get into the big thing, Christos, I really want to remind people of some really basic stuff that we talk about every single time we come here on the show and we get started. First of all, we always have a poll. I want you to take a look at the poll. You can go there right now and go to the poll on the LearnTV website. If you go ahead, you go there, you can answer the question, are you using Azure AD for your users? So head over to aks.learntv and you can answer those questions. And then also, we've got today's big idea. There's a Learn module. If you want to head over, you can go check out this Learn module, but don't do it quite yet, because Christos and we've got plenty to talk about. And so, Christos, before we kind of talk about the subject, the Microsoft identity that we just spent a bunch of time taking a look at, and I think it was really, I love that little video. It's super direct to the point. Let me ask you the first question. Where'd you get started? How'd you get here? And what do you think about doing coming up?
You mean role-wise, like what I've done in the past? I worked as a consultant. I've been a developer for about 16 years now, which is scary. 17 years, man. Years go by fast. So 17 years writing software for various companies, various finance, to back ordering, to manufacturing, to whatever. I've done quite a few things. I've always been around the .NET ecosystem. So since university, back in 2001, I started with .NET, and then I stuck with it, but I've played around with Java, I've played around with Node. So I wouldn't say I'm polyglot, but I can cut code in different languages, which is enough for me to make damage. And in 2006, I joined Microsoft. I just closed my 5-year anniversary. I just had my 5-year anniversary. So
super
back
awesome.
in March. I worked in the field for the first 2 years, supporting companies as a field engineer. And that was a very fun experience. It's like consulting for a day. You go to one customer, you work with storage, you go to the next customer, you do something totally different, like event grid. And then you go to the next customer and you do Node. So that was a fantastic experience, onboarding very quickly to cloud and seeing what developers are doing and helping them solve problems. And it was a lot about education. And then I decided to see how I can fare in marketing. So I moved into the marketing team and I worked with developers around gaming, around mobile, and around Visual Studio for Mac. I also had all the Azure tooling, so Azure CLI, Azure PowerShell, Cloud Shell, which was a lot of fun, helping developers to learn about these tools and be more successful in building things. And then I missed being super technical. So I was like, what am I going to do next? Let's go and do some identity stuff, which it's very close to my heart because I like to play with security, and I've always been security aware. And I've done my fair damage trying to create my own identity systems in the past and stuff like that. So I wanted to get deep into the subject. And now I work as a developer advocate for the Microsoft Identity team. The future, I don't know what the future holds, but it's just bright and fun, helping developers write secure software.
That's kind of the way I feel. I look at the future here at Microsoft. It's super bright. In this world nowadays, we've got so many opportunities to talk to people. We've got so many people that we really kind of need to reach. So we're not necessarily done by any stretch of the imagination with what people need to learn about Azure. We got some really cool comments already. Looks like Bruce. Let me bring up. Bruce has sent us Bruce Lane sent a cool comment. He said, MS Graph rocks, and so do you, Christos. So it looks like you've already got some fans. Very, very cool. Hey, so I want to ask you, as we kind of get into the subject today,
Mhm.
because I know how important identity management is, how
Yes.
important the security of our applications. What is your definition of Microsoft Identity Services?
Yes. So I know that the video talked about Azure AD, but Microsoft Identity is probably an umbrella of terminologies there. When it comes to identity, we all obviously talk about digital identities, and we need to have a way for developers and companies to identify who the user is and what they can do in the system. Whether it's an internal user or whether it's an external user, we need to know what they can do with our system. So Microsoft Identity provides you a capability to build authentication and authorization in your platform of choice. And it allows you to grab that information from the users and then provide them with a customized experience and also a secure experience for storing the data, accessing their data, and then making sure that there's no cross-pollination of people accessing wrong data, of you providing access to their own information.
So that includes services like, conditional access, which I
Yes.
think is important,
Yes.
and of course, multi-factor authentication,
Yes.
enabling that both in our access to our applications itself,
True.
front-end authentication, also back-end authentication, I think is another part where you can utilize these services. But all of it kind of falls under this big idea of IAM, identity and access management. Am I right?
That is correct. Yeah. And we have enterprise, and then you have consumer IAM. So you can choose what kind of users you want to sign in. I like to say to developers that when it comes to building identity systems or systems around identity, you have one decision to make at the very top with two basic options. One is, are you going to sign in enterprise or school users? Like, are you creating a line of business application for your at Contoso or at Microsoft.com? Then Azure AD is the solution for you. But if you are creating a web app or a mobile app or a forum for your friend and needs to run somewhere, and you need to be able to sign in users that are not part of the org, they're like, hey, I'm Jay with my Gmail account. I want to come in and be part of your community. Then this is where Azure Active Directory B2C comes in. So that's the a username and a password database, or the adding the ability to sign in with social media accounts. And then at the back of that, that's the front end, authenticate and authorize users. And then at the back of that, we have so many more branches of identity where it's not really identity per se. Like you're using Azure AD behind the scenes, but you don't see it. For example, this morning we did a fantastic demo for Global Azure. Big shout out to the Global Azure team for putting a fantastic event together and having so many fantastic speakers from around the world. But I had a friend of mine from the UK co-presenting with me, and we built a secretless solution where a mobile app built with Xamarin could sign in users and authenticate against Azure AD, call a secure API with an access token, and then that secure API could call into Cosmos without using any secrets. So end-to-end secretless solutions without using any passwords, keys, API information that could actually become an attack vector for your solution. So that's all underpinned by identity. And the fun thing is that
reducing exposure, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, there are so many stories making the news every day that either something was not secured correctly and the company made the news, like Casolo in Indonesia, where a month ago had 500 million accounts exposed because they put their information in a storage account insecurely. So it was a public storage account without any access control. And then, 530 million accounts from Facebook that we'll never know if we were part of or not. Although Troy Hunt did make a significant effort to see and help you if your account was ever compromised. So, and secrets. I mean, developers can either accidentally make something by having access to production systems. Hey, if I can sign into the SQL server, I can delete records. And I've seen people deleting production records because they thought they were in a QA system running a query, and then boom, happened. So we want to eliminate also the risks of people having access to production systems, and also remove the liability of me knowing the secrets. Right? Why would I know the secret if somebody else can take care of that for me via Azure Key Vault and Managed Identities? And in my app, all I care about is providing the business logic, the implementation details. Everything else is somebody else's responsibility. There you go.
Sure. So Bruce Lane, he sent in a question, and he wanted to know where is the best place to store passwords? Is it in Key Vault?
It depends on what you're doing. Sometimes you don't even need to store passwords. As I said, if you are, for example, calling Azure resources from a front end, then managed identities can take care of that for you. So there's an implicit trust between the service, the front-end service, and the back-end service, let's say Cosmos or storage, that a specific identity can only access the data on your behalf. However, if you are talking about passwords in general, and thank you for the question, please use a password. Please use a password manager, right? Any password manager will do. You can choose commercial products out there that you have to pay money for, or there are free ones. I use Bitwarden, right? So Bitwarden is a free tool. That runs everywhere, cross-platform, on your phone, on your devices, on your desktop, and allows you to, on the browser as well. So it allows you to manage your passwords. The Authenticator app is fantastic as well. You can do MFA plus manage your passwords. But what I want to make sure is that people don't get complacent and lazy with their passwords, because it's the force of habit. I can't think of a new password. I already used my previous password. And the problem with that is that once a website gets compromised and your information makes the news, then there are tools and hackers out there that will take that information and try to sign into other websites.
Sure, and it's also going to hit the reputation of your business and the people who are behind the scenes. And so we've got one more question, and I think I can actually answer it. Dakota says, just starting using B2C, actually, it's a powerful and quite a lot to learn, especially custom policies. Absolutely. Any good sources, Microsoft, and absolutely. Microsoft Learn is definitely the place to go. So you can get started with, say, learn the Azure fundamentals. And once you get through to the fundamentals, you can get to these individual modules like managing identity and access and just getting started with Microsoft Identity. So these are really great tools. Thank you, Dakota, for taking part. So we're going to get started. And I want to take a look at some of the things that you have prepared for today.
Yeah,
but the thing I want to remind everybody before we get in there is that we've got a poll. Our poll is really going to be something that helps Christos and I know, who's watching, what their Azure AD spread is right now. So are you currently using Azure AD for your users? Because Christos, you told me something in the preview for this week's episode. We do not want developers managing user databases.
Nope.
It's a terribly scary thing. And so everybody, why don't you go ahead, you take the poll, and also be aware Christos has places for you to join him after the show. You can go to his Discord for his 425 show. And if you want to watch the 425 show, it's on Twitch. When do you do the 425 show?
It's every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. We do about 2 hours of content. Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes it's us cutting code. And our goal is to present end-to-end scenarios. No matter the language, no matter the framework. We've done stuff with, with AWS and integrating with Alexa in Azure Functions. We've done Python. We've done Go. We've done Java, Kotlin, mobile apps, desktop apps.
Sounds like you're all pretty prolific.
It is very prolific. We try to be as inclusive as possible, and we try to also present, it's not just identity. Identity is always a component of what you're building. And it would be a very dry show if we just said, hey, this is how you add identity to your ASP.NET web app. See you later, right?
That's why we have little shows like this, so that we can kind of get it all in.
Exactly.
And we've got about a good 40 minutes in the show left today that we're going to talk about everything. And that being said, I'm going to bring up your screen, Christos, so you can kind of give me an idea of what exactly it is we got going on today. Why don't you tell me a little bit about it?
Well, first of all, if you want to play with Azure AD, and that is for Azure AD, not for B2C, but if you want to play with Azure AD, there's the Microsoft 365 developer program, which is brilliant because it gives you free access to a full-blown Azure AD in a test tenant. It means that you as a developer, even if you have already Azure AD in your company, you can have this one to play around with You don't have to have admin consent. You have test data to play with. And therefore, you can move quickly in building solutions without being blocked by your IT team. And I say that because I work for Microsoft, and our MSIT team manages Azure Active Directory very tightly. Obviously, we don't want everybody to have access to everybody else's data in the organization. So there are certain permissions that we need to escalate and ask for consent from our admin team. And that's doable, but it's time-consuming, and it's easier for me to use the Microsoft 365 developer tenant to add value and build something quickly, and then pass it on to somebody else and say, now you can go and play with that. So join that. That's free. It's free forever. You don't need a credit card. You just sign up with your email account. It gives you free access to a P2 Azure AD with all the conditional access and multi-factor authentication and all the goodness. And then it renews every 90 days. So as long as you use it once every 90 days, that it's an everlasting free Azure AD tenant for you.
And what's great is if everybody takes a look at the banner down there, like it says over there, you get a free developer sandbox, and just like on Learn in Microsoft Learn, you get a free sandbox to do a lot of these things so that you can kind of work around the different kind of modules and problems you want to solve without actually having to do it in production. And if you want to, there's $200 in free Azure credit. There's like 12 months of free services. There's so many things. So sign up if you haven't already. But Christos, why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you got to show me today?
Well, today, since we're doing demos, and I'll probably be using mainly .NET, but we'll do some examples in JavaScript. It will be, how do you get started with identity, right? I don't know identity, I'm new, and I don't want you to spend 3 months learning about OpenID Connect and OAuth 2. Obviously, you're more than welcome to do so, but I know that in most cases, you'll be working on a task. Your manager will come and say, hey, Chris, can you please create a new website? We need to be able to sign in users, and then they need to do other stuff with our platform, probably call some data. So if that's the case, identity is just one component of your bigger 35 list task. And I want you to be able to quickly get started with identity, knowing and having confidence that what you implement is correct. As we said, we don't want you to manage your user databases. And I've been in companies that had hundreds of them, since different teams were working on different systems, and it becomes a massive challenge to manage those accounts. You wouldn't be surprised to hear that I had people that left companies and they were still able to access production systems 2 years after they left because their account was still somewhere hanging around in some old database, and they could access production system as an admin.
I've heard these types of things a lot, and it's interesting because it's even in the smallest kind of little bits and pieces. Like, say your company had like a WordPress.
Yes.
And you're doing all your authentication and authorization in the WordPress database, as opposed to using some sort of like OAuth system or using Microsoft Identity. You could have someone go in and say it. And I'll tell you, I know someone that got into some bad business back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And he decided that after he left the job, he did not like the people. And he went in and he deleted all their networking routes and deleted the backups. He ended up getting in some big trouble. But the idea is they fired him and they did not actually terminate his access. And so he was able to be a bad actor. And so I think, like we mentioned this word before, exposure. We want to reduce exposure as much as we can when we're working in applications, in authentication for the apps we build and the actual systems that we do the building on.
That is correct. Exposure is, you as a company and you as a developer, you want to have as little exposure as possible to things like that. I think yesterday was Wednesday, and we did a fantastic stream on passwordless. How can you, as a company, use Azure AD to go passwordless? So YubiKeys, hardware keys that allow you to do two-factor authentication, you can set them up for your users, and therefore they never have to remember their passwords. But you can also have like an admin YubiKey. That's a break glass approach where you put in a safe and you put the pin in a different safe. And if something happens and you need to quickly get admin access to your resources, you can use the break glass approach, which is brilliant. Like, security at its maximum with hardware and physical media to prove who you are and what you know. So Azure AD provides you with all these capabilities. And if you're working with B2C, the 200 Azure credits will allow you to get up and set up your Azure subscription. And then B2C is another resource that you spin in there. And it actually allows you to have up to 50,000 monthly active users for free, which means that you can set up your business and start working with B2C and signing users, unlimited sign-ins and sign-outs for the month for the first 50,000 users. After that, I mean, that's a good problem to have, right? You hit 50,000 users, you're probably making some income. You can pay a few pennies or a cents to pay for identity, but it scales, and it scales well. That's the important bit. As I will be showing you these things today, and we'll jump into a demos. I know that people are dying for demos. So as
we got about 35 minutes to go, plenty of time, or not that much time, either way you look at it.
Oh, we could be here all day doing demos, but we'll focus on the important ones. What I want to say is that these things are like the scalability and the security are given to you for free. You can go from 1 sign-in a day to 1 million sign-ins a day without batting an eyelid. We do 30 billion authentications per day on the Azure AD platform. That is 30B with a capital B. That's 30 billion plus, which means that we can scale to your needs. If you hit 1 billion, that's a good problem to have. We will scale with you. But as a developer, you never ever have to think like, how am I going to scale my database? How am I going to replicate and restore stuff if something goes wrong? How can I scale my MFA solutions if I'm using SendGrid or Twilio to send emails and texts and stuff like that? Trust me, I've done my own kind of a authentication system, and it's hard. It's very hard. We have a scary slide. We have a scary slide somewhere with all the services that comprise Azure AD. And when I saw it, I was like, I was so wrong about my abilities to do that. We have 1,500 engineers plus 1,000 PMs working hard, so you don't have to work hard. So let's see what it takes to actually get started with authentication. So let's maximize my screen because that's where the demos are kicking in. Okay, so I've signed into my Azure AD test tenant. I'm using my test tenant because it allows me to have the flexibility of showing data that I wouldn't be able to show otherwise. And in the app registration is where you come to show your intent. I don't know if any of you has ever worked with Google or Facebook or Twitter or Twitch to authenticate users or integrate with the systems, but you have to create an application. So in Azure AD lingo, it's called an app registration. And in here, we come and create a new one, and we'll just name it FunBytes. AzureFunBytes. AzureFunBytes. And then we'll say, I only want to authenticate users from my organization. Now, fun story. Yesterday, somebody pinged me on Twitter and said, I'm trying to sign into OneDrive, and I want to use just Microsoft accounts, not Azure AD. I want to bring people with their live accounts. I can't remember what the term is these days. Is it Microsoft account? Is it MSA? Is it live accounts? So hopefully people can relate to one of these terms. But they said, I want to sign into OneDrive and let users play with their OneDrive using MSA. And I said, you can actually do that. And it's brilliant. It takes a few seconds to do that and integrate with Graph. So I'm not going to use that now. I'm just going to use accounts in my organization. And then I'm not going to change anything down here. I'm just going to say register. So I'm following the video. You see what I'm doing here? I'm following exactly what the video was doing in the beginning. That's why I said I'm probably redundant. So
I'm glad you're here. So don't worry. You're giving us so much more than just watching a video. So thank you.
So some things over here have changed since the time that video rolled, and everything you do these days will be using MSAL by default, the new V2 endpoints and the new library that we have. And in fact, last week we just announced the Node.js GA of our MSAL library. So if you're building with Node as a server-side web framework, you can actually use MSAL now to authenticate users and acquire tokens for them. Now, for this example, I'm going to use JavaScript. I will say we're creating a single-page app. And again, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not a JavaScript developer. I can pretend I'm a JavaScript developer, but I'm not. So here we're saying, okay, I want to, what kind of users do you want? Sorry, what kind of framework are you using? We have support for Angular, which is heading very, very quickly for a GA. But we do support you with the preview bits. We have React. We even have Blazor WASM, which I think is super hot these days. I don't know how many people you brought to talk about Blazor and Blazor WASM and what have you. And then we're going to go with JavaScript. Now, you'll notice for JavaScript, we have implicit flow and we have auth code flow with Pixie. This is the old one. I would like you to move away from that as quickly as possible, because it's an insecure way of doing things. There are stuff that are sent on the browser via the URL, which can be intercepted. So it was a way to run authentication, but it was less secure. Now with the new auth code flow and Pixie, it's PKC, by the way, it's not PIXIE, as I thought when I joined the org to begin with.
I always think of Pixie like Pixie booting up on an old server, PXE.
Oh, right, okay. There's that one as well. Anyway, it's pronounced Pixie, but it's a proof code for key exchange. In effect, allows you to use a more secure way and create a trust framework between the client and the identity service. And there's a verification process that takes place with a common code. So we don't have to compromise the client-side code that we're running with secrets or what have you. And there's a process for verifying the existence of that relationship. So with that, let's go and create this JavaScript solution. And it will walk me through the steps. It will say, well, we need to do some changes in the configuration right now, so that we'll know where we need to send the tokens. So this URL over here, or URI, will be where the application will be running for now, as we're testing this locally. So let's make this update. As long as as well with that update, the process behind the scenes also updates the code accordingly. So when I press download, it will populate some variables or some values that are necessary for running the code. Now let me unzip this one and copy it into my demos folder, and then we'll open it in VS Code and see what it does.
Sure, let's do it. And I want to remind everybody, I know I've mentioned it before, but make sure if you want to ask some questions, so because we got a little less than a half hour, please send them into the chat. And as Christos finishes up some of his demo, I'll make sure I get to your questions. And if you haven't yet, take that poll. Remember, you can look on LearnTV right here, aka.ms/LearnTV. You can take that poll.
Yes, take the poll. Let us know if you're using it. If you're not using it, I saw this. It's complicated. Please reach out to me. If you find identity complicated, please reach out to me or JP, my partner in crime, and let us know where you're struggling so we can help you. We're on Discord, we're on Twitter, we're on TikTok, and we're even on Instagram. So we're all over, trying to be as hip as possible at my old age of 43.
Hey, I'm 42 myself, and I'm doing this, so I get it.
I can't promise any dancing though, because I'm awful at dancing. So if you should join me on TikTok, don't expect me to dance while I'm talking about identity. I'll do my best.
I'm going to agree with you there that TikTok is not my thing. I'm kind of glad that in the end, Microsoft didn't buy TikTok, because I didn't want to have to think about using that platform and having to dance.
We were so close, by the way. I forgot about that. It was last year, this time, right? It was around this time last year. There was big
about that.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, if people who like it, that's awesome. I don't want to take away from what you're doing. I know there's I know Scott Hanselman, he's been doing some real fun TikToks.
Yes.
And, I know a bunch of other people around the team, they like to make TikToks. Personally, I don't know how to dance, and I'm not going to try to start.
Well, the nice thing is that there's a tech talk hashtag or code talk. So I'm seeing a lot of SAI movements over there, and I wanted to get ahead of things. So I've started doing stuff on TikTok. By the way, it takes time to get these things right. People are actually very committed in doing these things, and it takes time to get everything right. But let's not divert from the important bits, which is here, talking about identity. I mean, I would love to talk about TikTok and being hip, but I don't think it's as interesting as this one, right? So what I have here is very, very quickly. Remember how I said that some things will happen behind the scenes. This application ID 482, it's actually here. It's matching. So in effect, I'm ready to press F5 and run this baby and authenticate. But before we do that, let's see a little bit what's happening here. There are two files that are important from our perspective, from an authentication perspective. The first one is the auth config. This is where we define what Azure AD tenant we're going to use and which application we're using. So right now we said that we want to use an SPA approach to sign in users, and that's what we configured in our app. So we have the client that matches that, we have the directory that matches our test directory, and then we have the redirect URI. This is where we expect the tokens to arrive. If this doesn't match your app registration, and there's a mismatch, the authentication will take place in Azure AD, and then it will fail you because it will say, I don't know where to send you the tokens. And there's a mismatch between your code and the configuration. So please fix one or the other. Or somebody's trying to hack and take ownership of somebody has changed the registration or your code, and they're trying to hijack your tokens. So that is something that is quite scary and can happen. So we protect you against that. And this other day I was talking about token binding. So we're working on this kind of standard where you'll be able to bind the token to the client secret, and that creates an extra layer of security to protect you from token hijacking, which is fantastic. This is coming. Token binding, continuous access evaluation. These are some of the exciting things that you get for free as a developer. So for now, we have the configuration. The cache location here tells you where you're going to store the tokens once they arrive, especially for the access tokens. Mm-hmm. And depending on where you store these, you might get single sign-on, you might get the session shared across multiple tabs, or you might have a single tab sign-in. So every time somebody opens a new tab, they have to re-sign in. So it's totally down to you how you configure this. And lines 16 to 34 are only for logging information. You don't have to use them if you don't want to. It's good practice always, but from a configuration perspective, the minimum you need is these 6 lines of code. Now, let's see what it takes to sign in users actually, right? So first, on line 3, we instantiate a new public client. This is something that runs on the browser, so we can't have an expectation of confidentiality. So this is a public client. We can't have secrets, okay? So our client here is a public client. That's our MSAL. We say, get me a new client. And then we use the client to sign in. So line 48 to 51, call the login pop-up. So the users will present it with a pop-up. It will expect for the people to sign in, or for the person to sign in, or the user to sign in. The response comes back, and we change the UI to say, welcome, Christos. And then if there's an error, it will just log the error somewhere. Sign out is even simpler. It's just a one line of code that says, go and delete the session cookie, the auth cookie, and then redirect the user to Azure AD or B2C to sign out. And then finally, we have another bit over here, which is for acquiring tokens. So once the user signs in, we want to go and acquire a token for another API. In this instance, we're using Graph because I don't have to set up an API and it's already there and waiting for me. But it could be a third-party API like my own APIs. It could be a Weather API, although you can't use MSAL for that. Or it could be, actually, we have a Weather API on Azure. We announced yesterday the GA of the Azure Weather service, which I did not even know we had it in preview. If you didn't know, now you know.
Oh, yeah. And it's been under Azure Maps, right?
Yes, but
let me grab a link to that so people can take a look at that. That's really cool.
And I wonder if you can use managed identity to authenticate to that and then get the data. Can you imagine?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I'm going to put it all for you in the chat right now, and here it is a banner right below. So if you want to find out about this Azure Weather service, if you want to have live weather in your apps, there you go. Query it.
There you go. So here we're trying to, this is a very standard MSAL practice. This pattern, you'll see it everywhere, no matter the language. The first thing that we try to do is get a token for you silently. So if you have already signed in, if you already acquired a token, we don't want to prompt you again for another token. We don't want you to sign in multiple times every time you want to grab a token. So we have a cache that stores this information securely. But if it's the first time that you're using it, it will prompt you it will fail with an expected exception. Notice how here we have instance of MSAL interaction required. It means that I want the user to go and either consent or sign in again so they can consent to the token. And then once the token gets acquired with the acquired token pop-up, we can return the data. So let's see this in action. First, we need to do an npm install because it's the first time that we downloaded this and it's using npm. So npm install for this one should be a quick one. And now we can do npm start. It should be listening at port 3000. So let's open our local browser and see what happens. So here, localhost 3000. It's not the prettiest website out there, but it has a nice sign-in button. So we can click on this one. And the first thing I get is I am presented with which account do you want to sign in. Now, it's a single tenant app, so I need to sign with my cmatskas on Microsoft.com. That's the tenant we're using. So I'll use this account. This is the consent framework. This is very similar to your mobile phone when you install an app for the first time and says it needs to use your pictures and it needs access to your contacts and it needs access to your network, right? We're doing the exact same thing here. We set the expectations that this app is expecting you to consent. In this instance, we're expecting you to consent to your profile information, so I can see who you are, and also we're getting an offline access, so we can get a refresh token to be able to re-authenticate behind the scenes with a refresh token. This is standard OpenID Connect stuff, but see, I haven't talked about protocols yet, and we don't have to, right? Let's say accept, because I want to see the data. Check this out. We get the results back. I've signed in. I can see my profile over here. It's brilliant. And this is just test data on my test tenant. Now, I want to see my emails, right? This app actually offers me the ability to acquire a token and go and read my emails. So let's do this. But check this out. It says, well, you haven't consented to allowing the app to read your emails yet. Do you want to give access to that? That's very important because we're seeing two things here. One is dynamic consent. I didn't have to declare all these permissions up front. In fact, I didn't even have to configure them in my app registration. MSAL allows me to dynamically request for tokens, for resources, as we need them. And with that, I can say either yes or no. If I decline and I don't want the app to have access to my email, I will say no. But let's say accept. Now, if you run this on the Microsoft tenant, it will say you can't access your emails, obviously, because it needs to protect me from being silly and showing my corporate email in demos. And second one, it's something that requires elevated permissions. So MSIT is protecting us from disclosing information that you shouldn't have. So another example why the test tenant is fantastic. And you can see now, MSAL did all that for us. It took very few lines of code. In total, I think it's less than 20 lines of code plus 4 lines of code for configuration, which is brilliant. And you can use it today. You can download the MSAL library for your framework of choice and start working. As I said, the pattern is very similar. But if you're in .NET, things are even better for you. We try to minimize the amount of code you have to run and the amount of code that you have to write down to a single line of code. Do you want to see that?
Yeah,
.NET rocking?
Absolutely. Let's take a look at some .NET.
Right. Let's see .NET. Right. Let's terminate this one. Let's come out from this directory and let's do CD. Actually, let's do .NET. Let's clear this. So put it at the top. .NET new. We'll say web app. So we're using a web app. And we'll say --auth single org. So I'm still using Azure AD, but I could easily do individual B2C if I wanted to. So
and you're just using the .NET CLI to do this, so nothing special.
Correct. However, on Tuesday, last Friday, we had Jean-Marc and the Azure MSAL team to talk about the new tool that they're building and the next version of tooling that not only will configure and bootstrap your code, but will also go into Azure AD and configure the app registration for you. So when you finish that process, all you have to do is just F5 and runs for you, which is fantastic. Because up to this point, it doesn't do the Azure AD configuration. We'll have to do it ourselves. And then we'll give it a name, AzureFunBytes net. There you go. So we'll go and bootstrap for us the .NET solution. It's Azure Web Apps. And then let's go and look at it. So cd AzureFunBytes and then .NET, code. If you use code it will open the current directory inside VS Code, which is brilliant.
Love it.
Yes.
Make it easy.
Shortcuts,
that's what we try to do. We try to make it as easy as possible. And just to remind everybody, and I want to make sure you all know, we got about 15 minutes left in the show. It all goes so fast, I know, Christos. And so if anybody has questions that you want to have answered about Azure Identity, this is the time. Let's get them in. And while you're, like, I know I keep mentioning it, take that poll, please. Please take that poll. We've got like 11 votes already. I always love to hear what you all have to say about this week's subject. So head over to LearnTV's homepage, where you can obviously watch me here every week. You can watch all the different shows we have, like Hello World, and obviously just take the poll, ask questions. So what do you got for me next?
So next, I'm showing you the new libraries that we have. It's the Microsoft Identity.web, which is an iteration of the previous MSAL experience. It's built on top of MSAL for .NET, but it provides you with the ability to sign in users and acquire tokens for other APIs that you need to do all in one go, and all nicely built and abstracted for you. So these two libraries will do, one will do the authentication, and the other one does the UI. Like there's no controller for authentication. It's built into the UI. Obviously, you can build your own experience if you want to, but why not just use the built-in ones for now? In the app settings, you'll see that we have placeholders, so nothing is accurate apart from the instance at the top. Or if you're using government or other instances which are not public cloud, then you may have to change this one. But for now, this works perfectly as it is. And then in the code, I just wanted to show you the code. It's literally 2 lines of code, 32 and 33. But you said, Chris, you can do it in 1 line. So I wasn't lying when I was saying that. There's a better way to do it. So let's see how you can do it. Services.add Microsoft Web App, no, not API. I've done this before, and it came back to bite me. I was like, why is it not running? And then I passed the configuration, and that's it. It is a single line of code, so I was not lying. If you're going with the defaults, if you're doing everything by default, that's how much code you need to write. Doesn't get better than this, right?
I love simplicity. It's very important.
It is. So this is the middleware that sets up the authentication, and based on the settings here, let's go quickly and make an app registration so we can see this in action. Okay.
Let's do it.
Because there's no better way to prove that something works than doing it. New app registration, AzureFunBytes.net, and then we'll say register. We're using a different approach here. We already have the project running, so I don't want to download the zip. So we'll go into authentication. This is, again, where we're going to show our intent. And you can add a platform. You can say, I want to sign in users using web, which is our case, but you can also choose single-page app, which we did before. You can do native iOS and Mac OS or Android. And finally, UWP or desktop applications or console can be configured here. They require different settings based on what you do. In the redirect URI, we'll go HTTPS because we're running locally, localhost, port 5001.
Oh, so it supports local development too.
It does. It actually allows you to do local development. But the nice thing is that you can have multiple URIs here for redirect. You can have one for local, you can have one for QA, and one for production. Although it's best practice to use different app registrations for different environments. But for now, we'll go for that. And then we'll say, I want to get my ID token. So I'll say, configure this. And that's all we need to do. Now we're ready to rock and roll, right? So we need to copy a few things. So we need the application ID. So let's put it there. No, that's the tenant. That's the app ID or client ID. Then we need the tenant ID, which is this. Sorry, did I copy the wrong things? Let me see. If it's B5, no, that's fine. Tenant ID is here. And then finally, I need to give my domain name, which is cmatskas.onmicrosoft.com. By the way, if you don't know where to find this information, you can quickly jump into the root of your Azure AD, and down here, once it loads, come on.
It'll give you tenant info. There you go.
That's your primary domain. You can copy it from there. That's all we need to do. Now, let's run it and see what happens.
Sure.
.NET. Did I save everything? Is everything saved? Oh, see, I didn't save this one. So let's save this. Yeah, it's high resolution, so less visibility. .NET run. Not even building. We'll go straight to running because I'm that confident that the code will run. So it's building and running, and then I can say run, and the first thing I would get is a prompt to sign in, because that's how the middleware is set up. You can obviously say I want certain pages to not require sign in, like the home page, and then going anywhere else requires authentication. So here, again, I'll sign in with my local account. Again, we need to give permission to that. Now, unfortunately, I'm already signed in, so I'm not getting prompted for two-factor authentication, but this account is actually set up with 2FA. So maybe we can show that as an example. So let's see. Oh, damn. Redirect URI is not correct. Remember, I screwed up somewhere. So let's see what I messed up.
Sure.
Uh,
Nothing better than to diagnose your problems. And
hey, it's a live
sometimes when
demo.
you do it and you do it live, you deal with these things. I
It's a
know
live demo.
yeah, absolutely.
Let's see, authentication, local. It's not local. See, I messed up.
The good old fashioned fat finger, as we call
Yeah,
it.
exactly. It's a me problem, not an Azure AD problem or code problem. So here we probably need to say HTTPS localhost 5001. Again, we'll do this. Sign in. Done. Now, you know what? I'm going to sign out because I want to show the fact that you get a lot of things for free. I'm going to sign in from this account, sign out. In fact, I don't remember my password now, so I need to use my password manager and then be on Microsoft. No, it's not on mine. It's on Microsoft. So I'll copy that, and then let's go and sign in. It's my account. No, it's this one. I'll enter my password. And check this out. Now my phone gets prompted to sign in. So as I said, this tenant is configured with two-factor authentication. I didn't have to write any code for that. I saw it was just a single line of code. And therefore, I'm going to enter 875149. And lo and behold, it's working.
Very, very cool. I love it. I love seeing how easy it is to kind of go through the process and come out the other end with a authenticated application that makes sense to people using languages that are also extremely common nowadays.
Yes.
People love using JavaScript. They love using Blazor. They love using .NET. These are C#, whatever you want to call it. All these things are supported. There's libraries for you to use. All these services have Azure's got an SDK that you can always use to hit the API endpoints to do things like send information to Azure AD, so you can automate your user creation, your database management, all these things. So I think the one thing that I always think about is onboarding and offboarding users. We talked about that early on, and the fact that it's so important that we onboard people and offboard people the right way. So before we go, we've got about 7 minutes left in this show. I want to remind everybody before we finish up that if you have any questions or comments, please send them right in. And obviously, if you go to LearnTV, there is a number of links that we've already got here for today's show where you can find out everything you need that we've got. And then also, of course, we've got all these comments from everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. And of course, we'll get back to the poll in just a few more minutes, and we'll talk about who did what. But make sure you go ahead and you vote. So, Christos, do you have anything else you want to show us just before we get going?
Probably not to show. I mean, in my code here, if you want to switch quickly to that, I want to show that it's not just authentication here, but we also provide you with the ability to acquire tokens for downstream APIs. And then not just that, but we have built-in token caching. So this in the past were things that developers had to build or implement themselves. And now we provide one-liners for these things, so you can quickly go and grab the tokens or have an iToken acquisition service that can go and get tokens based on the scopes that you provide from your endpoints. You can even add downstream APIs. You can see this line down here. So if you have services that call other APIs and you need to pass authorization headers, then this process will automatically inject them once you acquire your tokens. It's mind-blowing how well thought this library is. However, I've been talking about MSAL all this time. We're not really forcing you down that path. If you have any other library, if you have already systems that work with OpenID Connect and OAuth 2, you can bring them along. You just change the endpoints. In some cases, you might have to add some extensions. Like, for example, Passport has an Azure AD specific extension in Node.js. But other than that, it is fully supported. So because we're built on top of standards, open standards like OpenID Connect and OAuth 2, anything works and interops with existing code. You don't have to strip everything out if you want to come to our platform and scale out and be more secure. So that's any platform, any language, and we don't care where you're running. Obviously, if you're running on the Microsoft platform, if you're running on Azure, that's brilliant because you have so many other benefits. But we support people running on AWS and Google Cloud and DigitalOcean, whatever really works for you. The whole point is I want you to be secure.
One quick question before we go. Is there a VS Code plugin for all these identity services that we've seen? Because I've seen you've got some IntelliSense auto completion. And so I'm assuming that there's some sort of extension for VS Code.
So this one is part of the IntelliCode for .NET. And because the library is part of the .NET library, it's not. However, that was a great question because we are working on a VS Code extension. Like we're working for IntelliJ and Rider to add these capabilities. Rider already has Azure AD integration since September last year, 2020. IntelliJ is currently being worked on, and we have VS Code in the plans to actually build extensions where you go into your extensions down here. Not here. You'll go here to where are the extensions? Here. Where are my extensions? Sorry.
There you go.
There you go. No, I wanted to actually use the extensions. Oh, it's down here.
Okay.
Azure, right? So you have one for Azure AD on the side, and you'll say, you know what, I want to create a new app registration. It will go and do it for you without leaving the IDE. And then you will be able to bring the code from that extension, from that Azure app registration into your solution. It will tell you how to implement and integrate with that. So that's exciting for me because it allows for less context switching. It also allows you to not have to sign into the portal and do it everything from the comfort of your ID of choice. Visual Studio has it.
I love it. I love it. So, hey, Christos, we've got about 3 minutes left. And so I want to just go ahead, start wrapping up, letting people know where to go to look for everything. And so, of course, you're on Twitter like just about everybody else.
Yes.
We can find you, your Twitter handles right underneath your video at Christos Matskas. There, I see you got lots of stuff going on. Hey, check out this recursion we got. It's
meta Inception.
Yes. And then, of course, you can follow at AzureFunBytes on Twitter. You can find out about all the previous shows. And also, if you want to see it streaming here, you can find out all the different things that are going on. Keep up to date. Very, very cool. And the other big part, other big thing that I'd love you all to kind of keep your eyes on after the show, take a look at it. There's Microsoft Identity on Microsoft Learn. So that you can get free training, get the Sandbox, all that stuff. And of course, Christos, we had our poll. Let's take a look at how our poll did. So let me refresh just in case we got any new votes. So,
while you're bringing up the poll, just to let everybody know that we actually have a full, playlist for the actual workshop that you showed. We did it with the Reactor team. So if you want to have commentary as you do it and do it with us, it's all recorded. I can actually give you the link now. So if people want to go there and do it with us, as we did it on the stream, and they can learn and understand why certain things are done in a certain way, then feel free to do that as well. It's exactly
absolutely
on top of our workshop.
So we got a minute left, and so everyone knows, here's our poll, how it turned out. How are you using Azure AD are you using it? And 83% said yes of our 12 votes, and it wasn't complicated for anybody else. It's very good to know. So, hey, Christos, I will put the link in the chat really quick, and then what we're going to do is give everybody the big wave and say goodbye. Christos, thank you so much for taking part. I hope everybody checks out the 425 show. I know that you do that. And, Christos, we will hopefully do something again. We've got so much more to talk about the future. Let's do that, okay?
Love it. Thank you for having me. I had a blast, so I appreciate it.
Everybody,
thanks, everyone.
Give you the big wave goodbye. We'll see you next time. I'll be back next week. I believe I got Donovan Brown with me. We'll be talking some Helm and AKS. So until then, you've been watching AzureFunBytes. We'll see you very soon. Have a great rest of your day.